So I think the first thing that comes to mind is you have to master a craft. And I think you would agree with this, that the reason that you make it to the table is because you're really good at something. You have to have some strategic advantage, right? In order for people to invest in you and to see value in you, you have to bring something to the table. It doesn't always have to be what you think it should be. And you don't have to be better than everyone. You just have to be the best in your particular business or the best at a particular function in your business and you'll get to the table. And then that's where I think things get interesting, at least from my perspective. Relationships are everything, right? You need to invest in a person before you need them. That's how you build a relationship.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the King Dems Podcast, where we share the stories of extraordinary people and dissect art. We're live, ladies and gentlemen. You are once again welcome to the King Dems Podcast. And today I have with me, fighting out of Illinois, United States of America, make welcome Christopher, the Faith and Finance legend Swing. How are you, Christopher Swing?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Wow, you are welcome. And of course, how is the weather swinging in Illinois?
It's a little cooler today. Yesterday was around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, so it was nice and warm. Today it's more like 50, so it's a little bit cool, but it seems like it's going to be a nice day outside.
Wow, interesting. So words, on the grapevine tell me that you bring the swing to the weather in Illinois.
There's definitely lots of swings in weather here. So if that is the case, I'm sorry to all of those who are in the weather area, in the area of which I live, but it definitely changes hour by hour here. So if anybody's from or spend any time in the Midwest, you just have to wait a couple of hours and you might get a totally different experience.
So do I need to call 911 to get to get them to evacuate
You never
Christopher
know.
Swing for swinging the weather?
You never know.
Wow, you just never know. Anyways, you're still a blessing, regardless of the way you're swinging the weather. You're the airbender in Illinois. The theme of this podcast is faith, finance, and forward thinking. Leading across industries with integrity and vision. You are a man that I admire a lot, and you are a man that I appreciate a lot. And I think I have a very strong bias towards you, strong positive bias, anyways, because you align very much with my progressive philosophy. As bestowed upon me that title by a certain wonderful Morgan Anderson, who's one of the top tax debt experts in the US. She says I'm a modern day business philosopher. And I think you are also a modern day business philosopher, but let us meet the mind of the man that is behind the mission. So let's get personal and build that connection and humanize, that's a leader that everybody admires, which is you. So who is Christopher Swing beyond the boardroom and the bio?
So I mean, I'll start with I'm just a farm boy from Central Illinois in the United States. I came from a small Midwestern town of about 850 people, so very tiny little community. And I think probably the easiest things to see were just our family values, and that was that we have faith, we're Christians, that we take care of our family and we enjoy each other, and that we work hard. And obviously, integrity is a non-negotiable. And I think if you look back in my history, you'll see that, my first job was delivering newspapers. So I learned the discipline. And to be honest, back then, sometimes I didn't have that discipline. And my dad or my mom would get a call from one of my paper route people and say, he didn't leave me a paper this morning. And I would have to go and take care of that. But I learned that discipline in customer service, whether I delivered them appropriately the first time or I had to fix my mistakes afterwards. And I did that before the sun came up, I would say. So, now I think to describe me, I would say that I'm a husband, a father, a mentor, an elder in the church. And those are the things that I think kind of give you a visualization of who I am. I'm deeply driven by relationships, which I think is why you and I get along partially so well. And I love creating opportunities for other people. I've kind of gotten to that point in my career where success isn't about me anymore. It's about the people that are around me. And I think that's something that people can learn to do earlier. I wish I would have done that earlier because I actually think that's when I became a lot more successful, when it was
Better
more
late than
about,
never.
yeah, exactly, but more about developing, those around you as opposed to just focusing on yourself. And then I would say things that are important to me. I like to tell stories. Most people who talk to me for long periods of time, and they walk away and they're like, well, that took like 4 times longer than it needed to. But I like to give people some background on where I come from. I love to travel. I have two mission groups that I support regularly, the Eastern Dominican Christian Mission in the Dominican Republic, as well as Developing Kids Ghana in Ghana, Africa. The Eastern Dominican, those are both Christian organizations, by the way. The Eastern Dominican Christian Mission is focused on building churches and kingdom businesses, as they call it, in the Dominican Republic. And Developing Kids Ghana is about educating the youth in Ghana, Africa, in the Tamale area. And this will be my third trip in July, where I'll go and help obviously further their education, but also help folks learn and develop strategies to start businesses with little capital and how to manage their personal finances to be able to take advantage of those businesses. But I
Wow.
think that in a nutshell is kind of who I am. Hopefully that gives you some idea of who you're talking to when you talk to me today.
So I have a fight with you because you're heavily, invested in, great work in Ghana, and I'm from Nigeria. And
Yeah, I know.
Nigeria and Ghana are rivals.
Sorry.
Brothers. So I have to, I've been looking for a reason, to fight with the man that so much aligns with me.
I
So
mean, to
I
give
have,
you to give you credit though, Nigeria is much bigger and has much more population and probably has
and
more
much more problems,
opportunities. Yeah,
much
well,
more,
both. It's both,
SWOT
right?
analysis,
Yeah.
the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats,
Yeah.
Don't isolate the opportunities, also look at the threats.
Okay, you win.
So let's invest in Nigeria. We can collaborate on that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
There's a lot to unpack from what you have said to describe yourself. But when you look at previous episodes of my podcast, it very much aligns with your laid down philosophies, even though we have never met each other before now. But my philosophies are well documented in previous episodes of this podcast. I always talk about that attitude of gratitude, which is good
Yeah.
attitude. And yeah, a very big thank you to you for sharing your time, on the podcast today. Like I always love to say that when a person shares their time with you, they're sharing their life with you because the SI unit of life is time. And I very much believe in the core philosophies and principles of care, respect, hospitality, work, and uh, a deep connection, you know, by way of faith in
Mhm.
God. So those are, pretty much my fundamental life principles. And yeah, when you articulate those, you see it very much aligns with your principles that you hold so dearly. And I was speaking with a couple of friends earlier today. I said, what differentiates successful people from unsuccessful people basically is the principles by which they operate. And I've been privileged to speak with successful people from different corners of the globe. And there's always a common denominator, the principles by which they operate. I've never been to the United States. I grew up in Africa and currently reside in Europe. But you would agree with me that anyways, we share the same profession, but the principles that we have held dearly, that we operate on, are pretty much similar. That is what endears you to me and me to you. And that is what makes me appreciate you, and you also appreciate me. You know, the principles are tested and trusted, and that is what forms, the way of life and our belief systems. So from me to you, it's a very, very big and deep, profound appreciation for you. That is a man that does not only talk the talk, but walks the talk. So speaking of success, I always say something as well, that there is no success without a successor. And it's wonderful to see you paying it forward, because
Thank you.
that is, you're welcome. That is what your legacy pretty much is going to be documented around. Your impact is what matters. And I've said this on this podcast multiple times. What is important is not the example of your power, but the power of your example. So you can talk all the talk, but if you do not lay a good example for others to follow, it's pretty much useless. And thank you very much to you for being a good example for others to follow. Talking about how you have navigated several leadership roles successfully in healthcare, logistics, banking, private equity. What would you say is the common leadership thread that you bring to every of these industries?
I think first, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I don't really understand why I've been as successful as I have, but I've been blessed beyond belief in my career, in my personal life. I give all the glory to God for that. And I don't know why he picked me over someone else. But one of the things that I wanted to say to you before we get too far into this is the amazing thing that you do. We talked about income disparities in our prep call. And I think that one of the ways that we can level the playing field is to give knowledge to people who don't have access. And so there's a whole lot of people in Nigeria, hopefully in Ghana, that are listening to this, that are saying, oh, at least we have somebody on our side because you Nigerians are against the Ghanaians. But no,
We're
seriously though,
brothers and sisters. Why hate when you can collaborate?
exactly. That's
Yeah,
my point.
Nigeria,
Exactly.
Nigeria.
Exactly. And the key to it is that, those the people from your home community, if they'll take the time to listen to your podcast, they will interact indirectly through you with people they would never meet in their lifetime. And it will give them ideas and ways to grow themselves outside of themselves. And I think that's really one of the key things to the podcasting arena that gives a lot of value. And so I applaud you in your work because I know you take it
Thank you
very
very much.
seriously.
Thank you very much.
And so I'm glad to be here to help your audience to get a different perspective, from myself, who I truly am blessed beyond belief. But kind of to answer your questions, the uh, the common leadership thread that I bring to all these different industries, I would say, is clarity of vision. That stuff doesn't change. It's a different vision, but whether you can explain your vision with a clarity that other people can attach to it, really important. Humility and learning. I don't know. I'm in the surgery business. I'm not a surgeon. So there's a whole lot about this business I don't know, but I learn something new every day. And I'm willing to say I don't know everything about this business, and I never will. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'll never understand everything about the business. And then just having a relentless level of follow through, because it's one thing to create all these plans, right? Like you can have the best plans in the world, but if you don't complete the plans, none of it matters. So I think the way that I lead is with a values first approach, which is what we've kind of discussed. And it's about people over process, and it's about purpose over profit. So, like, keep it simple, silly, right? The KISS principle. Strategic simplicity. How do you eat an elephant? Well, you don't, but let's say that we did. We would do it one bite at a time. If you sit back and you're like, oh my gosh, I have this massive animal in front of me. How do I accomplish eating this thing? Well, the only way you're going to do it is one bite at a time. If you worry about the bite that you're putting in your mouth, it's not stressful. We do it over and over and over again. And for people my size, we do it more than we should. But if you think about this massive animal in front of you, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm paralyzed. I don't know what to do. And then back to to your point earlier, I really champion others' success. Like that's got to happen no matter what business you're in, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what it is that you're doing. If you want to see a significant change in how people value you, find other people and help them be successful. And it's amazing how that will, no matter where you're at in the organization, that will change perspective of who you are and what you're doing.
I very, very much appreciate the fact that you are a man of faith. And interestingly, your faith is premised upon the Word of God. And the Bible is the manual by which Christians live their lives. You agree with that, right?
Absolutely.
And everything you've said just now in terms of the principles by which you pray, I'm going to relate them to Bible scriptures. So you talked about clarity of vision, and the Bible says in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 2, it says, then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it. Plain, clarity of vision. The Bible is a complete book. The Bible is a manual. And, in terms of that drive you talked about, the Bible also says in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 29, have you seen a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men. Talking about the returns on investment. The Bible says in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, there is a time, for everything under the sun, right? Talks about a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest what is planted. It's really clear that your principles align with the Bible, and you also touched on your generosity, and the Bible, appreciates the principle of giving. In Luke chapter 6, verse 38, it says, give and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down and shaken together and running over, shall men give unto thy bosom. For with the same measure that ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. So it is very, very clear that your principles align with the principles of the Bible. And when you say you're a man of faith, it is not a joke. It is actually very clear. And once again, I appreciate you very,
Yeah,
very
thank you.
much. You talked about, the surgical industry that you're operating, Vantage Surgical. It is actually revolutionized outpatient specialty procedures. So how did you drive that transformation, and what was the biggest obstacle?
So just like I said before, we focus on culture first, right? So we want to align the team with our values, which are integrity, creativity, commitment, communication, and excellence. And I'll just say communication is a struggle in every business. I don't think that we're like over the top, got it solved. I just think that we know that we need to focus on it. And so it's part of our core values. We've invested in innovation and scalable systems. So like our operating system is on Salesforce. One of the things that we focused on in this business was, we used to have a CRM, and then we had uh an accounting software package called Great Plains, and then we had an operating software package called VO. And what we found was that everybody was using different contacts within the same organization. Even if we sold to them, called on them as a potential customer, all three of those systems had unique contacts in them. They all had incorrect information, basically. And we said, when we build our next system, we want to have one source of truth. So we want,
Integration.
yeah, so we want the account that the salesperson calls on to be the same account that we're invoicing, to be the same account that we're operating in. And so we spent a ton of money and a ton of time to figure out how to solve that problem. And I think it made us better. Uh, and then, I think the biggest obstacle that we have is resisting the status quo. So we're a 34-year-old business, and, that business has consistently evolved. We're in a fast moving industry with, surgical services. And so you can't rest on what worked well last year. Like, you've got to keep evolving your offerings and keeping up with what is the latest and greatest in surgical practice. And so I think that's probably our biggest struggle at times, is ourselves, because in general, people don't love to change. And when you're in a
Exactly.
fast moving business, you just don't have a choice. It's
Mhm.
it's literally change or be left behind.
Change over change.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going, actually. Yeah, change or be changed is a great, well, one way or the other. Either you're changed as in you're out of business, or you just acknowledge that you have to keep changing and reinventing yourself all the time.
Speaking of reinventing the wheel, and of course, you talked about that resistance. I'm really glad you are uh, a certified public accountant. I'm always trying to be careful. You guys in the US always changing nomenclature. For us, we call ourselves chartered accountants. So you're a CPA, I'm an ACA, and our training actually equips us with a lot of strategic tools and management and administrative skills and competences. So I remember there was this management model that talked about success of teams, the forming, the storming, the bonding stages. So what tools would you say, what strategic tools or management models did you adopt in the course of, getting your team to embrace being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and embrace the concept of change and
Yeah.
yeah, run with it.
So one of the biggest things that we do is, there's a U.S. submarine captain named Mark Kohler. It's Marc, and I'll spell his last name wrong, but I think it's like Kohler or something like that. He teaches a strategy called 40/70 decision making. And basically, what that is you have to be comfortable. You have to learn to be comfortable making a decision when you're only between 40 and 70% confident in that decision. And as you can well acknowledge, if you wait until you're more comfortable than that, you've already missed the opportunity that existed in front of you. And if you do anything before you get to 40%, you're just guessing, right? So there's no real basis for any of that decision. But one of the things that's funny is, he believes, based on studies that have been done, that when you get to a 70% confidence level, the reality is that you're 85% confident. It's just your body is still rejecting some of the data that you've collected, or some of the knowledge that you have. And so, I think that's probably the biggest thing that we use from that perspective. And then, I think on the business side, we're kind of in the big data game. So we collect tons and tons of data. And then it's like, okay, how do we use AI? How do we use some of these forecasting models to figure out where our opportunities exist? Because that's the benefit that you get with operating in scale. So we operate in 25 of the US states, and it basically runs from Denver, Colorado, all the way to Boston, Massachusetts. And that's a huge part of the country. If you look at the West, especially the North states in the country, there's not near the population level as there are kind of to the Southeast from Denver and down and then up the East Coast. And so with that, we get the opportunity to operate with more data than the average business would have. And so that gives us kind of the tools to say, okay, so where are you at? Where are you doing well? So we operate in those 25 states in 5 different regions. And
Mhm.
I can't remember exactly if there's 5 states in each one, but let's just assume that there's close to that. And we compare each other. So it's kind of like having a professional basketball team and we say, hey, this guy's better at rebounding than this girl is over here. Or this girl is better at making 3-pointers than this guy is. And so we take and we say, what can we learn about each of these individual business managers? And how do we then extrapolate their results in this area across the rest of the businesses? And so as we learn new things in new divisions, we're not dictating what they do. We're asking them to be all stars. And we're saying, look, if you go out there and you make good faith efforts, we're with you. Like, we want you to make some mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing the envelope hard enough.
Something I'm really glad you made reference to was AI. I did have a former T1 baseball player on the podcast recently, and he was talking about the use of AI and data analytics in making decisions in business and in sports. So he was of the opinion that if you utilize the data that you get from the plays in sports and analyze them with AI, you would be able to always have the best players on the field
Mm.
at all times, right? But I want to pick your brain on AI because, it seems like there is a generational war and some sort of resistance, towards AI, especially coming from the Generation X and the baby boomers. I'm a millennial. I know you are Generation X, and I think Generation Y are very, very AI receptive. Well, what's your take? How do you see AI shaping the landscape of business in the what I say in the long term?
All I can say is, if you've ever started using a model, and we kind of discussed this also in our prep, uh, it doesn't it doesn't give you good data overnight for 2 reasons. First of all, the model doesn't know you yet. And secondly, you don't know how to ask it the right questions. But as the model learns about you and your business and what's important to you and what's important, how you like to talk or what information you like to have, the model evolves and it gives you better answers. And at the same time, you evolve and you give it better
Machine learning.
prompts. Yeah. And it's amazing. I would say that I'll just make this perspective. I can't imagine trying to run a large business without it into the future. Now, I could be totally wrong. If the government step in and they say, we're not going to use this anymore, okay, maybe then there'll be some impact there, but it's really hard to argue with the efficiency.
Uh-huh.
And what it does is it takes, for a decision maker like me, it takes me out of the work portion and into the analysis portion. And what I mean by that is, if I write out an article or I write a script and I go back to review that script, I'm not a very good reviewer of my own work because I think it's amazing because I wrote it. If I use chat gtp to write my script, or gpt to write my script, I'm much better to review something that comes out of that because, first of all, I feel like I need to make sure that it's authentic towards me, like it sounds like me and it makes sense. But I also need to make sure that it's accurate because I don't necessarily 100% trust everything that comes out. Like, I don't auto publish anything that comes out of chat GPT, but I use it, and I think it's imperative, especially for future business leaders, to learn how to harness the power that's within those models.
Uh-huh. I think, yeah, I completely agree with you. And what was going through my head is it actually works both ways. For me, I'm a very, very big ChatGPT user. I have trained my ChatGPT so well that
Yeah.
it's operating at the gifted level.
Yeah.
And I think the level at which your AI works is actually directly proportional to your IQ. It's artificial intelligence for a reason, but it's driven by human intelligence and garbage in, garbage out.
Not only that, but if you ask the wrong questions, it gives you the
Mhm.
answer for the question you ask, and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
you'll look at it and be like, that doesn't help. And it's like, well, yeah, you asked it the wrong question. Sorry.
But spoiler alert, do you know that a lot of people, I say something and I know this is not nice, boys, but the truth is we are in an age of explosion of information and data,
That's
but
true.
we are also in an age of unprecedented heights of human foolishness.
Mm.
So you get to see people who use ChatGPT, use different AI models, and they still produce very, very atrociously wrong information and mislead, people in decision making. So it's pretty much garbage in, garbage out. Yeah, artificial intelligence, or if artificial intelligence is actually led by human foolishness, we know the catastrophic outputs that we will get, and you will be unable to train the AI model because the AI is actually meant to be an assistant and not the other way around. It's not meant to be
Right.
the decision maker. The human is actually meant to be the decision maker. So you train your AI to actually, create outputs that actually meets your expectation and your use case.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Let's talk about private equity.
Okay.
What's your approach to identifying the high potential businesses and how can small business owners prepare to attract investment?
So first of all, I'm going to talk about me personally, when I'm thinking about a business to acquire into Vantage, which is a private equity owned business, the thing that I'm looking for is a value lift on both businesses first. So when I think about something that I want to do with to acquire into Vantage Surgical Solutions, my question is, will this add value to Vantage, and will Vantage add value to this business that I'm buying? If you can get those two things to work out, these are slam dunks, right? But then let me go beyond that. So what am I looking for in a business that I want to acquire? I want strong leadership, and I want strong leadership that isn't trying to walk out of the business as soon as we buy it. So I want a commitment from those leaders that they believe in our mission and that they think that their business can help us succeed in our mission. I need a defensible margin. So I need a margin that is going to be accretive to the business. So I like to buy businesses with higher margins than what Vantage currently is. And I need a compelling growth story because anything in private equity needs to grow 20% per year or more to make it interesting. And we can talk about the word interesting at some point, but I love to talk about interesting. Um, so alignment matters, vision, values, and culture. I don't want to fix them. If you come into my business and especially if you're a material acquisition, the last thing I want to do is try to figure out how to correct a long history of poor values, poor vision, or poor culture. This is not non-starter. And then I don't want to buy a business from an owner that integrates their personal stuff into their business financials. So, like, I want to be able to see clean books where they don't go, oh, well, travel isn't really travel. It's because I like to go to California once a month and I spend a week out there and it costs me $100,000 a year. And so, therefore, my books are showing that I only make $600,000, but I really make $700,000. And I'm like, not a great start. Like that's not a great start for me. I want clean books where people know what they're making. It's defensible. I want good documented processes, and I'm buying talent, right? Because there's always competitors in these spaces. It's rare that I buy a business that is the only business that does that. And so I need a management team that is going to be able to be with us and level up that business as we grow it. So that's
I
kind of
like
what in a nutshell.
I like that, trying to change culture is way above your pay grade. And yeah, the most difficult thing to deal with is humans. So if the culture does not align, I don't think it's really worth the investment. But I'm quite curious to know what your perspective of interesting is. What is interesting to you?
So interesting is a word that my private equity firm, Faros Capital, out of Nashville and Dallas, use to describe where we're at on a barometer scale. So I would say anything in the single digits is definitely not interesting. When you get to 10, 11%, you're starting to get interesting. And when you exceed 20%, now you're interesting. And so that's kind of for a lack of a better way to describe where we're at on a business consolidation or an acquisition or even our performance. It's kind of how we laugh about it at a board level, but we describe how interesting something is. And basically what interesting means is, are we getting closer to being able to monetize whatever it is that we're working on, whether it be an acquisition or a new product line or whatever. So
I think this is becoming interesting now.
that's
Yeah,
funny.
you've actually helped to integrate tech and innovation into healthcare logistics. So, where do you see the future of patient-focused care going in the next 5 years?
So let me just kind of summarize in a nutshell for those non-US listeners really quick where US healthcare is. We're paying more than most people can afford for premiums to buy health insurance because we're not under a socialist healthcare system like what the UK is, where
The
they have
NHS.
yeah, exactly. Now, granted, I understand you can buy private insurance, and so that part of the system is more like what we do in the US. But I would argue that when you get into your 65 plus years, you go on Medicare, which is much similar to your healthcare system in the UK. The problem, though, is that the deductibles in the US are punitive. And so, let's say that, for instance, for me, my out of pocket maximum in a calendar year for healthcare is 8,000 US dollars. So I'm paying a bunch of premiums in order to have access to insurance. But if I get really, really sick, I could pay up to $8,000 out of my own pocket for the deductible. So that's for the average person, that is astronomically too high. And so there's a problem. So stepping back from that, I'm not going to talk about how I'm going to solve that because to be honest, there's a whole lot of moving parts in all of that. I think that the things that I'm focused on is what is going to happen to healthcare in the US in order to contribute to reducing some of those problems. And what I see happening are decentralization. So like if you think of the big hospitals that we used to have, right, of years past where they're 20 stories in the sky, I don't see that happening anymore. I see us going back to more of a clinic where the physicians are more focused on your health and less focused on sickness. I think that they will use more telemedicine because you can aggregate telehealth providers wherever they are available in the country as opposed to where you are. I think we will see much more care either at home or closer to home. It'll be tailored towards individuals. And I think that at some point in time, a person's willingness and commitment to take care of themselves will affect the availability of healthcare. And I don't know how exactly that works, but I think one of the things we have right now is in the US, we have an obesity problem. And at the same time, then those people are incurring a whole lot more healthcare dollars in order to take care of themselves after they've allowed, the obesity to kind of take over their life. And so, you've got diabetes, you've got, all kinds of nephrology type issues and things that come from that. And so there's got to be some pain that goes along with making poor decisions. So I think that will be affected. I think you're going to see, back to our AI stuff, AI driven diagnostics. So I'm going to enter all the
That's happening
symptoms.
already.
Yeah, all the symptoms that I have. And it's going to give me a guess of like three things that could be wrong with me. And then I take those three things into a
That's
provider
streamlined.
or into a telehealth visit. And then they say, okay, this is likely your problem. And these are the tests we're going to run to confirm it. And then you move on. Right. And I also think that we're going to get to the point where you're going to go to the best care, especially if you need surgery. And it may be even a plane ride away as opposed to, just local care, especially for like serious things like, say, heart problems or, or maybe even serious orthopedic problems. Because I think that as the healthcare insurance companies get closer to the providers, like they employ more of them, et cetera, which is happening in the US, that they will give you the benefit of going to the best care with the best rehabilitation to get back on your feet as soon as possible. And it'll end up being cheaper for them. And then I think the key is that the people who can balance tech in healthcare with human empathy will be the winner. And here's why. Because tech naturally has some desensitization. I don't even know if that's a word.
Too sensitive
It
to
basically
human emotions.
doesn't have that empathy perspective, right? And so, you punch in all these things and GPT says you're overweight. And you're like, well, that's not a very nice thing to say. And it's like, well, it's the truth, unfortunately. But, we want to be pandered to. So it's like, okay, well, you probably need to lose some weight. It's not going to say that. It's just going to say problem, overweight. And so the teams that can balance that information with some level of empathy will be successful. And then finally, I think the biggest issue in the healthcare space, especially in the US, is a lack of navigation. And what I mean by that is, okay, I went to my general practitioner and he says that my blood indicates that I'm anemic, but he doesn't know why I'm anemic. And he didn't tell me what I should do next. So I really need somebody, either a nurse or a internal doctor or internist or whatever you want to call them, to dictate what are my next steps. Am I just supposed to be anemic forever? Do I have a problem that's causing that anemia? Who should I go see? Should I, it's kind of pointless to go back to the same doctor because he obviously didn't indicate, what the next steps were or whatever. And so who's going to navigate those patients through that? I count myself as lucky. I have access to CEOs of hospitals and, chief medical officers of hospitals where I can call and say, hey, I got this crazy thing going on. What do you think I should be focused on? And they'll say, I would do this or whatever and give you good advice. But that's not true of the everyday person. So somebody needs to be able to help these guys know, okay, well, what do you do next? And how do they make money? So that way they're incentivized to do these services because they're not part of the actual care continuum per se, but they could take a lot of cost out because if that person just guesses who to go to next and then they go and spend $500 going to a doctor that says, I can't help you, then they do it again and again and again. Whereas if somebody were navigating that process, they would say, okay, well, you need to go see this person, and you would cut out all that wasted time and dollars.
It's a lot to unpack. I think being a player in that space, you definitely cannot solve all of the problems within in the industry, but you're able to make your mark, to make your impact by way of selecting a niche area to provide solutions and provide efficiency in that area. So, what area are you and your team are focusing on to provide relevant solutions to the important problems within the healthcare space.
Yeah, so where we're focused is in the what I would call specialty surgical care.
Okay.
And how we look at success in that space is two things. First of all, we want to give access, right? So you think about the fact that we operate mainly, our mission is really around rural hospitals and in care in rural markets. And the reason for that is, it's not fair to a person that lives in a rural space to not have access to the latest technology and not have access to the best docs. And so our vision is if we can provide the average rural hospital in the US with the right equipment, we can help them attract the right doctors to come out and do those procedures, which causes, grandparents and parents, especially older ones, to have access to care in their community and that they can have confidence that the care that's provided in their community is similar or equivalent to the care that they would get in a big city.
Interesting. Back to our point of human beings being the most difficult resource to manage. As a board member and executive, how do you foster collaboration and alignment when the stakes and the egos are high?
I think it takes a personal relationship, in my opinion, because every person is motivated differently. And I think that's why it's so complicated, right? So, like, one employee isn't motivated by money. The next employee isn't motivated by pats on the back. The next employee isn't motivated by, they don't see success the same way we do. And so we have to understand what that is to them. And then we have to meet their needs. And I think when people truly believe that you're investing in them, we'll make mistakes along the way. The reason that I know some of my employees that aren't motivated by money is because I thought, oh, I'll just throw some money at this problem and it will go away. Well, then you do that and you realize, hey, that problem didn't go away. That wasn't the solution to the problem. And so it's really important to take the time and learn from my mistakes, right? To learn that you need to have conversations with these people. The thing that's crazy to me is we can't even agree how to communicate anymore because, Johnny wants to communicate via WhatsApp. Timmy wants to communicate via iMessage. Uh, George wants to communicate via Teams. Shalise wants to communicate via email. Some people even want to
Different
communicate via
strokes for different folks.
Facebook Messenger. It's like and everybody wants to see it how they want to see it. And so the question becomes, how do you figure that out? Because if you want the best out of these people, you need to figure out how to motivate them and keep them satisfied and moving forward. And part of that is knowing what's important to them. But when you have a company with 100 more people, that makes it really difficult to figure out, okay, I'm going to talk to Stephanie today. How do I get a hold of Stephanie? Does she want to talk to me on the phone? Does she want to text? Does she want a Teams message? I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
This reminds me of, the strategy model we learned, in the course of becoming chartered accountants at the stakeholder mapping. It separates different stakeholders based on their power and influence and at the level of interest of the stakeholder. It says for the stakeholders that have high power, uh, but low level of interest. You need to ensure that you meet their needs. For those ones that have low level of power and low level of interest, you need to keep them in account. The ones that have high level of power and high level of influence, you need to manage them closely.
Mhm.
And the ones with high level of interest but low level of power, you need to keep them informed.
Yeah.
So I think the stakeholder mapping is actually very, very important, in order to know how to manage the different levels of stakeholders. But speaking of the levels within which you have actually operated, you have actually served as a CFO, you served as okay, let's not fly over the heads of the layman. A CFO is a chief financial officer.
Yes.
COO, that's a Chief Operating Officer, and now you are a legendary CEO.
Yeah.
Americans, you like to call that president sometimes
Mm.
of the company. That's a Chief Executive Officer. So, which role would you say has actually challenged your growth the most, and how did you evolve through the process?
So every role has its own difficulties and positives, right? I think CEO is the most stretching for me. And I think part of that is because every decision, every direction, whether it's actually me making them,
Huh?
is under my purview and part of my responsibility. And so one of the things that I've found as a CEO operating within my own company, because so like to give you some perspective, I joined Vantage in 2012 as the CFO. In 2014, I started acquiring the business. And by the time that we sold it to private equity, I owned almost 40% of the business. And then they put a new CEO over the top of me for a little while I was the CEO, COO, the chief operating officer. That was a difficult time because that CEO didn't know what he was doing. And so it's never fun to see someone running your business that doesn't really know what he's doing. And the reason that I became the CEO is because that CEO wasn't effective. One of the problems that you have though is like there's a whole lot of people making decisions on your behalf within an organization when you're the CEO. And I'm positive that they have the best interest of the company, but sometimes they don't have the best information to make those decisions because you don't even know that they're making those decisions. And so I think part of it is figuring out how to let go of the control and also figuring out how to control some of the communication. So that way, when it's possible for me to help them to not make a bad decision, I can do that. But at the same time, I can also have a lot of history that a lot of the other managers within the organization don't have because of my experience, both in the finance, operating the core business itself, and then ultimately being the CEO. And so it's really like how do you build your team of leaders? And it's not necessarily just focused on the outcome, but you're ultimately held responsible for the outcome. And so I think that the key there is you have to develop deeper levels of emotional intelligence. And I'll take that a lot of what allows me to be an effective CEO, in my opinion, is because of my spiritual resilience. And so, I trust, I trust my people, I trust in God, and I know that the people that I have are in the right seats and that sometimes they're going to make bad choices and then we'll deal with the outcomes of that. And sometimes those bad choices turn out to be better outcomes than we would have picked otherwise. But it's a
Blessing
weird,
in disguise.
but it's a weird relationship, right? When you become the CEO, because like you need to empower these people to make better and better decisions because they're closer and closer to what actually happens in the organization. But it's like, how do you do that without hindering them while knowing that there's certain decisions that will hurt them and making a decision to say, I actually don't think this is the best decision, but the impact is minimal and it's a great learning experience. And everybody that is in business knows you learn way more from the mistakes than you do from the success. And so how do you let those people that you really appreciate make some of those I will call dumb decisions at times so that way they can learn from them just like people let me make dumb decisions. So I think that's what's the most challenging role is the CEO role. And it's really because I'm just super appreciative of all the things that my team does every day and the growth that they've had over the last year is absolutely unbelievable.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Mm.
And I very much appreciate you alluding to the importance of the spiritual resilience. And it reminded me of the philosophical model that I created recently, back to being a modern day business philosopher. I thought about me speaking with different successful people from across the globe recently because it was my birthday coming up. I think, yeah, that was last week, April 8th, and just reminiscing over the past 1 year. You've spoken to many successful people around the world, but what is the bottom line? What is the common denominator when it comes to being a well-rounded person? And I was able to attribute it to just one word. And do you want to know what that word is?
Yes.
That word is fitness. And fitness actually is comprised of four quadrants. So, number one, you have to be spiritually fit. And number two, you have to be mentally fit. Number three, you have to be physically fit. And number four, you have to be financially fit. So I would love to, put that model in the face of another modern day business philosopher. Tell me what you think about that fitness model and how it applies to yourself and your team and the successful people that you interact with.
I mean, I think I go back to, what it made me think of is, a professional sports team, right? And you can't perform at your best if you're not your best. And so, I think about being spiritually fit. I'm so blessed and I have been all of my life. I don't know why necessarily, but I'm sure thankful. From a physical fitness, when I feel my best, I do my best, right?
Hmm.
From a mental fitness, the same. If I'm in the dumps and then I have terrible work output. And so, sometimes you have to look at some of those other, maybe the prior two and say, okay, so am I spiritually not fit or am I physically not fit, which is why I'm mentally not fit? And then fiscally, the one thing I'll tell people is you should read The Millionaire Next Door. It's a great book. And the only reason I recommend it is because money doesn't work like people think it works. There are the ultra wealthy that can spend unlimited amounts of money all the time and never run out of money. And that's what we think of as success. But I'll tell you that there's a whole group of people in the middle between, say, $5 million of net worth and $100 million of net worth. And they don't operate that way. And that's the people that most folks that are listening to this podcast aspire to be. And if you read The Millionaire Next Door, it will challenge some of your perceptions on how wealthy people really operate. And it's not the way that you think they do. So I agree. I mean, I think it's a great model. And I think it's important to check all of those boxes if you want to be effective.
Wow. Thank you. Very, very big thank you to you. And I think I will ensure to have the millionaire next door in the description of the podcast. It's going to be in the show notes. So if you're watching this, kindly check the description of the podcast wherever you are watching or listening to it from. It's going to be in the description. So, you are into mentorship, faith, and purpose. And it's about inspiring the next generation with sound and grounded values. You have mentored countless professionals and even taught at the university level. So, what are the three most important lessons you share with rising leaders today?
So I think the first thing that comes to mind is you have to master a craft. And I think you would agree with this, that the reason that you make it to the table is because you're really good at something. You have to have some strategic advantage, right? In order for
Mhm.
people to invest in you and to see value in you, you have to bring something to the table. It doesn't always have to be what you think it should be. And you don't have to be, you know, better than everyone. You just have to be the best in your particular business or the best at a particular function in your business and you'll get to the table. And then that's where I think things get interesting, at least from my perspective.
Interesting again.
Relationships are everything, right?
Uh-huh.
You need to invest in a person before you need them. That's how you build a relationship. Like, I try to ask folks what I can do for them before I have an emergency where I really need something from them. Because if in fact you're going to someone to meet them with an ask, how likely do you think they're going to help you? I know my perspective of that.
A friend of mine calls it deposited into their emotional bank account so
Exactly.
that you can make a withdrawal.
And if you don't deposit and you can't make a withdrawal, it's like that's how the real world works, right? And then the third one is never outsource your values. And I'll give it to you in this perspective. Integrity compounds over time. And that's good or lack thereof, right? So if you have negative integrity, that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, think about your bad people, how they just keep doing worse and worse things over time. The same is true for people who have integrity. Their integrity is more valid and they focus more on it over time, and it's more costly to lose it. And so anyways, that's my perspective to answer your question.
Definitely and absolutely. Let's talk about your new podcast, Faithful. It explores leadership and faith. So, why is faith such a cornerstone in your leadership philosophy, and how does it inform how business decisions are made?
So let me just put it to you this way, and this is just my perspective. If you have faith and you truly have faith, especially if you're a
You can move
Christian.
mountains.
Yeah. But not only that, but show me someone that has faith that can separate themselves from that faith in their business. And I will show you someone that lacks integrity. Because if you truly believe that your faith is important to you, it will cost you at some point, just like integrity does. And that's how you truly can determine when or how deep your character is important to you, or how important it is to you, is when it starts to cost you something. Because it's easy to say, oh, I have integrity, or oh, I have faith. But, think about the Bible where, Jesus tells Peter that he's going to deny him 3 times. He's like, no, 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 he's not going to. And then, within a couple of pages, he does. And so, we are all guilty of that. But the point that I'm trying to make is, if in fact you have true faith, then you need to operate your business like you're a Christian. And let me clarify to some degree. That doesn't mean that there's so much transparency in what we do that you provide so much information to a person that it burdens them. Because as the CEO, there are times where we're struggling as an organization, and that's my problem. I'm the one that made the decision to get us there. Whether I allowed that decision or I caused that decision, it's my fault. I'm the one that carries the weight of that. That's not an entry-level employee's problem. They shouldn't have to worry about how to survive, how to get their kids to childcare, how to have enough food for the family. And on top of it, the fact that their employer is struggling. Like, that is not their problem. So it's not like, so I don't believe in creating this world where, like, okay, because I have faith, I'm going to dump all of this at the feet of my employees. That's not servant leadership, right? Servant leadership is, I'm going to recognize that my employees have struggles, and I'm going to understand when they say, I'm struggling. My wife has a sickness, or my child is sick, or we had one of our kids break their arm this week, and I'm going to have to miss some work. And I have to realize that if that were me and it were my child, I would miss work. And so I need to have that same level of flexibility with my team and appreciate them enough to say, why are you sitting at your desk? This is important. If your wife's struggling with some sort of an illness or disease, you need to be with her. And we need to figure that out as a family, how to allow you to do that. And that's what drives me in the Faithful podcast. And really, the overarching theme is I want to bring other faithful people, extremely well-intentioned business leaders that don't lose their faith because they're operating a business. Because if you truly have faith, you can't separate yourself from your faith when you go to work. You know, a perfect example is the other day I was sitting down for breakfast in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was with two of my founders of the company and partners in the business with us, and three employees in addition to me. And they looked over at me when the food came out and they're like, should we say a blessing? And I was like, of course we should say a blessing. And it was really cool because all of us at the table were Christians. And so all of us were extremely honored that we would take the time before a meal and bless our meal. And there's something about that when you can allow your faith to transcend your personal life into your business life.
I very, very, very much appreciate that. And it's also ultra beautiful to see how your values align with my values, your principles align with my principles. I love to see myself as a man of faith, God first in everything. I think on my Instagram bio, if you read through it, you see God first. And I don't take that lightly. I very, very much appreciate God and put God, at the forefront of everything that I do. And if you are to be a godly person, I don't care about being a religious person. I only care about being godly, right? The Bible says in Hebrew 11, verse 1, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And further down that chapter, it goes on to say that Abraham had faith and it is counted unto him unto righteousness. So faith is something that is deep, that is the currency of a believer. And it is not something that you just, would I say, decorate yourself with by way of talk. You need to talk the talk and walk the talk. And your true character is actually revealed in times of adversity and contingencies, not just, in regular times. And that faith is what guides you through in life. You know, the Bible also says, Your word is a light unto my feet and a lamp onto my path," right? So it's really interesting and wonderful to see individuals like yourself that are successful in life, successful in business, and hold their faith very, very strongly and dearly, and are able to be like the Bible says, you are the light of the world, right? You are the light of the world, and of course, you are also the salt of the world because you bring that flavor into the world. But our faith actually forms, the cornerstone of our philosophies as men of deep faith. Your podcast, it explores, leadership in faith, right?
Mhm.
And also helps you to project your philosophies, your highly, highly valued philosophies, right? So you also talked about where your character is exposed in situations wherein you are met with your personal gain and a trial of faith, right? Because you really never know your true character except you're tried, you're tested, then before you can be trusted. So what would you say to young up and coming leaders who feel overwhelmed, who feel stuck when it comes to the trial and the test of pursuing profit versus purpose? What's your advice?
So first, really quick before I answer that question, the one thing I want to clarify, and I know you know this, but I want to make sure your listeners understand it, is I'm not successful in spite of my faith. I'm successful because of my faith. because the leadership that comes from the Bible has allowed me to be successful. I'm not successful in spite of it. I think so often people feel like it's a crutch or something that holds you back from being successful. And I would say the opposite is true. But to your question, purpose driven companies usually outperform financially driven companies. And here's why. It's because the why. People buy your why. They want to know why it is that you do what you do. And they know when why you do is what they do. They know when you are doing it for money, and they know when you're doing it for the better of something. And it's so much easier to engage an organization that is trying to solve a problem than to engage an organization that's trying to make money. People just know. They can see it. They know how you talk. You know, if everything that you talk about relates to you and to what you're trying to accomplish or to what you're doing, they're going to realize that this is a person that's centered around themselves. If you focus on a purpose, that calling is always greater than your career. And so, like, when I think about the impact that we make in rural healthcare, I think about all of the places that, my family lives, and the fact that if something happens to one of them, they have the confidence to go to the local hospital, and it's there potentially partially because we're doing our job and we're doing it well. People want to be part of something meaningful. And when you believe in something that's meaningful, you will figure out how to do that profitably. And the profits will ultimately follow your purpose.
Wow, that is, very, very deep. And that's a proverb in Africa. Let's say a word is enough for the wise. And in Nigeria, in Yoruba, let's say uh if you speak half a word to a wise child, when that word gets, inside of them, it's gonna become a full word.
Mm.
Let they that have an ear hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches.
Mm.
Right. So your wise words, are well appreciated. It's essential that those people listening to us today do not just listen for the purpose of listening, but listen and internalize these words, digest them, and implement them, because you don't get to hear these kind of authentic and resourceful messages every day. So I really admonish our listeners to, take your time listening and, you know, try to digest this. And what a great way to segue into talking about challenges, mindset, legacy, digging deeper into resilience and mindset mastery. I love to talk about the mind a lot, and I'm grateful that I'm a social scientist by way of study. And even the Bible says, study to show thyself approved, a workman that need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. When it comes to the social sciences, I did study economics, but I was privileged to have studied, content and context in terms of psychology. Psychology is the study of the human mind, sociology as well, human social interactions. The mind is the most powerful tool, and even the Bible alludes to that. The Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Right. You have faced rapid industry changes and high pressure roles. Like, I am really curious to know how you maintain a growth mindset in the face of all of the uncertainty. because what is commonplace in this age and time is a fixed mindset, and that there's nothing more limiting than a fixed mindset. It takes courage, boldness to adopt that growth mindset. And they say fortune favors the brave. I don't know, maybe it's because you are in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Do not tell me that. Maybe because you are American and chasing the American dream. Do not tell me that.
Yeah.
That's just on a lighter note, Talk to us about your mindset mastery and that deep resilience that you have.
Well, without being too philosophical, let me just say that the only thing certain today is uncertainty.
Uh-huh.
Because I don't think, outside of God, anyone really knows what today will bring. And I think that a person who can embrace the discomfort will grow beyond their wildest imagination. Because so often we shy away from discomfort. But in my small mind, my perspective is that when we're uncomfortable, that's when we're growing. And if you look back at my career, and I know that your listeners haven't probably looked at my bio yet, but if you pull my bio, you know, through my different organizations, I've managed business units in excess of 1.4 billion US dollars. And I can tell you that growth, those opportunities came for me at a time in which I didn't have the experience to fill the role. But someone believed in me and said, you can do this and I will walk alongside you to help you. And if I hadn't embraced the discomfort of doing something I didn't know or I didn't have the confidence in, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so, I can't tell you that every situation will turn out positive. I don't know that. But I know that if you don't try to do something that's a little uncomfortable, you will never grow.
I love that. I love that very much. And just to buttress your point, somebody believed in you, but you believed in yourself and you believed in your God.
Yeah,
And in the words of the legendary Nelson Mandela, he said, if we try, we may fail, but if we don't, we have failed.
exactly. And then I think the other things that have allowed me to be successful in that same vein is I always surround myself with wise mentors and
Mm,
also with people who are smarter than me. And
mm,
I go back to, we used to have a joke when I was in school. And the reason that I thought the joke was funny was because it was supportive of me. But we
mm,
always said that the C level students would employ the A level students.
mm,
And that's so true. If you think about it, those of us who, were focused. So why I'm a C level student is because I'm one of those people who said, I went to college to learn something. And I always asked the professors, I said, okay, if you haven't taught me by the time it's time to take the exam, and I go home and I cram for 8 hours all this information into my brain, I come back tomorrow and I answer the question. I come back the next day, I have no idea what I learned.
mm.
That is not learning. That is not the purpose of me being in college. And so I would much rather have that time to build a relationship with someone than to go spend 8 hours studying for an exam. So that way I can quote unquote prove that I knew the information on their test. And then finally, my gratitude and my faith, they keep me grounded when the terrain is rocky. And, I don't know, it just takes me back to a TEDx podcast, which was that the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is grit. And I think there's some truth in that everybody's going to hit times which aren't perfect. That doesn't matter if you're Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Bill Gates. It doesn't matter if you're Warren Buffett. Like there's
Or John
days,
Doe.
yeah, or Tiny Tim, right? I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. There are going to be days no matter what your situation is, that aren't good. And the question becomes, when that hurdle rises to try to trip you, do you make it over the hurdle or do you stand behind it? And that's a choice that all of us have as humans. And I can tell you, if you want to be successful, you've either got to figure out a way around it or you got to figure out a way over it. And if you consistently do that time and time and time and time again through your career, all of a sudden you're a success. Go figure.
I very much appreciate something you talked about, how you surround yourself with advisors. And to the audience, this man is a man of faith. And I keep repeating it. The principles that this man keeps utilizing can always be traced back to the Bible. And of course, permit me to expose you on this one.
Sure.
Proverbs 11, verse 14 says, where there is no counsel, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. So
The one
everything keeps going back to the Bible.
the one thing that I want to clarify though, that people need to hear me, is that
Mhm.
I have wise mentors. This does not mean that you take your financial problem to your broke uncle and ask him how to deal with it. Because just because you have a mentor, like I
Mm.
have different mentors for different parts of my life. And people don't necessarily understand that. But it's like
Mhm.
some of my business mentors, aren't good at a particular function. But I'm not going to take advice from them on that particular
Mhm.
function when I feel like I
Mhm.
have that mastered. And
Mm.
it's the same thing, kind of back to your 4 quadrants, right? Like I'm not going to go find an obese person to educate me on how to be physically fit. And I'm not going to go find a broke person how to educate me how to run my finances.
Ought to be financially
And I'm
fit.
not going to find, someone who doesn't read their Bible to advise me on how to be spiritually fit. And I'm not going to find an insane person on how to mentor me to be mentally
Mentally
fit.
fit.
Like you just don't do that stuff. And so it's important that when you think about the people that you're having mentor you, you need to have a level of respect for what it is that you're seeking advice on. And if you're not, they can still be your mentor, but they can't be your mentor about that. They need to be wise in the area in which you're seeking advice.
I think that is well said. Square pegs and square holes. Do not put round pegs in square holes.
Right. For sure. Sometimes they
Wow.
work, but I still don't recommend it.
You see, you need to go to Nigeria because there's something they say in Nigeria. They say if somebody says they're going to make a garment for you, make a piece of custom made clothes for you, right?
Mhm.
Look, first of all, look at the clothes that you're putting on.
True that.
So you see, you're a Nigerian man without knowing it.
Yeah.
So when next you go to Ghana, please take a stop in Nigeria before you go back. You will love it. I promise you. If you don't like it, I'll buy your ticket back for you. I'll refund you your ticket.
Okay. I'm sure I'll love it.
And make
I
sure
love
make sure to
people.
have some Nigerian jollof rice.
Okay.
Mm.
I love people everywhere I go. So as you can only imagine, it doesn't matter where I'm at.
You know, just to give you a little bit of gossip, the Ghanaians lie to you that they have the best jollof, but the best jollof belongs to Nigeria.
Yeah. Are you
Don't
talking
tell them.
about jollof rice?
Yeah, jollof rice. Don't don't
Yeah,
don't tell
I
don't tell them
enjoy
I
it.
told you.
Okay,
Don't tell
I
them I
won't
told
tell
you.
them.
If you
Maybe
enjoy if you
maybe
enjoy
they
Ghana jollof,
I
you've
don't
not seen
know.
Nigeria
Maybe
jollof.
it's Nigerian jollof. I don't know what I ate.
Yeah,
You see?
that's a thing. That's a thing. The Ghanaians could go cook the Nigerian one and just
Exactly. See?
because you're a very important guest.
How would I know?
Who's gonna know? No one's gonna know.
I'm not gonna know.
Wow, but you need to eat the jollof in Nigeria. It's banging, trust me.
Sweet.
Trust me. Whoa, it's quite interesting. What's your take on today's leadership culture, especially in the wake of AI, remote work, and generational shifts and generational wars?
Yeah. I will just say that, in my opinion, leadership culture is being rewritten in real time. I'm not sure that I would be as successful in elevating myself through the different layers of organizations today as I was when I was there. And it gets back to what we've talked about. My relational skills are part of what made me successful. And if you and I are working on opposite sides of the pond and we don't ever interact, how do you pick me over someone else if you are trying to find someone to elevate in your organization? So I think that to stay focused on your values, so like flexibility is very common now, but where you can outpace other people are in your authenticity, in what the mission of the organization is and how it fits within your personal mission. Find and use new tools that are not threats to your career, but are tools to make you better. And maybe you don't even use them as the basis of your work, but maybe you use them to support your work or to confirm your work or to confirm your confidence in your work. In my opinion, the best leaders are learning faster, listening deeper, and serving wider. And that is so hard in this environment right now. But if you can master those things, information is easy, right? It's everywhere. But how do you learn the right things? And then the worst thing, because of the information, listening is so much harder, especially to listen for the purpose of understanding. It's easy to listen to respond. It's hard to listen to
To understand.
understand. And serving wider is more difficult. As we have people all over the country, I think of every day, like, how can I show them my appreciation? How can I be that servant leader to them when they're 1,100 miles away from me or 1,500 miles away from me? And that's a challenge, but that's where you have to stay focused on what's important and say, this is important to me. I need to figure it out. And I can't just accept that it's hard, because there's a lot of things in business that are hard. The difference between successful and unsuccessful are those willing to do the hard things.
I very much appreciate what you've said because pretty much it aligns with my philosophy. I've said multiple times on this podcast that the greatest form of leaders are the servant leaders. And for me, I pride myself in being a servant leader. I always want to serve, always, look for opportunities to serve because it is an honor to serve people. But I don't know why in this age and time people do not align with that philosophy. Growing up, my parents made myself and my siblings realize the great and immense value that comes with service to humanity. Nothing really tops it. When you think about the greatest leaders that have existed in the history of humanity, think about Jesus Christ. Think about even the greatly celebrated leaders, right? The Abraham Lincolns, the JF Kennedys, they have all been servant leaders. But in the same time, people tend to, like say, mistake being a boss for being a leader. They're two different things. They are not in the same dimension or trajectory in any way, shape, or form. And I very much appreciate you touching on the importance of servant leadership. It's something that is very, very close to my heart. But when it's all said and done, what legacy would you say you're most proud of so far? And what legacy would you hope to leave behind?
So I think probably the thing that I'm most proud of is that I've had the opportunity to build organizations where amazing people thrive and find purpose and live their lives in a way that is meaningful and is able to add value to other people within the country. I usually don't talk about this, but I'm at a point in my life where earning money isn't going to affect my lifestyle anymore. No single dollar will change my lifestyle. So no matter if I, earn $100,000 or $1 million, whatever that number is, it's not going to change who I am and how I live my life. I live in the same house that I bought before I got married in 2005. So we've lived there for 20 years. We don't anticipate going anywhere else. But my hope is that I'm seen as someone who lifts others, that I've given other people the opportunity to exceed their dreams or their hopes for themselves and their families. I hope that people look at me and say that I live my life by my faith, that I'm, you know,
Just shall live by faith.
yeah. And finally, my hope is that the world is a better place, and that in some extremely minute way I've made life better for someone. And I don't care that they know that it was me. Like, it's not about that at all, in my opinion.
Wow, I love that. I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I love this. So recently, I heard of somebody who needed to go to school somewhere. Yeah, back home. He was posted on a WhatsApp group that, oh, this person needs so amount. And I thought about it. I looked at it in pound sterling terms. It was some, you know, it wasn't big. Yeah, that's what I'd say. And I thought about it like, is this going to be the difference between this person attending law school and not attending law school? No, no way. And I made a contribution. And I told them, don't tell the person I did this.
Yeah.
I don't need their thank you, but that's that honor of making a contribution to a person's life, to their journey. Because I know what education has helped me to accomplish in my life. But I don't need your thank you. I don't need you to know. But that blessing that comes with you adding value to a person's life, especially giving them a value that in a direction that has actually helped shape your life to be in a better place. I'm grateful for that. And I love that that very much aligns with your own personal philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I just enjoy being able to help others and running a large organization. I don't know most of the people that benefit from our services, but
Mm.
I know that when my family needs to have a procedure done, I encourage them to go someplace that is utilizing our services because I have that much confidence in who we are as an organization and who our staff is, that they would be better to be in a facility with us than without us.
It's really amazing how, human beings who live in different continents but adopt similar
Mm.
principles are now able to align, and many thanks to technology.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Many thanks to technology. But let me make a quick joke before we hit the quick fire round, because
Okay.
we are wrapping up the session, and it's been a very, very deep knowledge sharing session from me to you. I very much appreciate you, and I can only say God bless you,
Thank you.
because silver or gold I have not, but what I have in the name of God,
Yeah.
I give you blessings.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
And you're welcome, and of course, always welcome. Yeah, you did mention that. I love the fact that you are at that level where money cannot change your lifestyle. You know, money cannot change your lifestyle. Money cannot change who you are. But unfortunately for people like me, I would say money cannot change who I am, but money can change my lifestyle.
Yeah. No, I agree with
So
that.
I am aspiring to get there.
And you will. It just takes time. You
Yeah,
just have to
it
believe in
does take
yourself.
time, and we're putting in the work. We're putting in the work.
Good.
Rome was not built in a day.
That's right.
Rome was not built in a day. Yeah, basically. Are you ready for the quick fire round?
Let's do it.
Are you ready to rumble? Okay, so I'll give you 5 questions and you give me an accurate, brief, concise answer. So, number one is, what is the most underrated leadership trait?
Listening.
Then I love that. I love that. I always say this. I've said this multiple times, anyways, that there are 4 language skills: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. But listening is the most underrated.
For sure.
I don't know why.
It's just so hard for us, right? We're so self-centered that it's like we don't want to actually listen to understand.
Yeah, and in order to listen to understand, you need to activate something called active listening. Yeah. So, number 2, one book every entrepreneur should read.
My recommendation is Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Good to great. So, number 3 is, what is one morning routine that every great person must have?
I would say prayer and strong coffee.
Whoa. For me, prayer, yes, but strong coffee, I don't like coffee. I'm sorry. I am
Everybody's got to have
sorry.
one.
Strong water, strong water. Anyways, our water in the UK is strong, by the way. So,
Okay.
strong prayers and strong water. You have to disagree with your mentors sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. You got to push the envelope. I'm all for it.
Yeah, yeah. So coffee for me makes my hands jittery and makes gives me stomach upset. So I can give you all the coffee in my house. So number 4, what is the biggest myth about CEOs?
That we have all the answers. It's
Mm,
like the number one thing is people think that, you know, I don't want to answer this question because I know that my CEO knows. And the reality is that there's a lot of questions we don't know the answers to.
but you don't know the answers to a lot of questions, but you know the right places to seek the answers. I think
Absolutely.
that's what's more important. Number 5, finish this sentence. Success without dash is failure.
Integrity.
Wow, I love that. For me, it has always been success without a successor is failure.
That's good too.
Ying, yang, yeah. Wow. And that has brought us to the hard part. And the hard part is saying goodbye. So from me to you, it's a very, very big thank you once again. Gratitude is always good attitude. Thank you very much for your time today. You're highly, highly, highly appreciated. I do not take your time and your words of wisdom for granted. And from me to you, it's my prayers to you is God blesses you, God keeps you, God expands your coast and ensures that your successors are also successful, and everyone around you is able to benefit from your impact, and your impact is multiplied across the globe. You are a good man, you're a great man, and you should always be well appreciated. I pray that the world sees the value that you're trying to create and is able to benefit from your wealth of wisdom and your servant leadership. Yeah. So before you leave, do you want to leave a shout out for anybody?
I'd just say thank you to you. I mean, you did a great
Wow.
job
Wow. You're making me feel important. I don't like to
no.
feel important.
Well, I can tell you that as a podcaster myself, I know the amount of work that goes into preparing for one of these sessions.
Wow.
And
So please help me beg them. Help me
it's
beg the audience
it's been a
to show
joy.
us love, to
Yeah.
share, to engage. Please tell them.
Yeah. Please engage. I can tell you that a lot of effort goes into what you get in a final product, and what a joy to be on your podcast and to be with your listeners. If they need to connect with me, they can find me on my LinkedIn or go to Faithful via whatever podcasting player that you listen to. You can listen to my podcast and gain more insight. I hope that I get the opportunity to speak to your audience again at some point in time in the future. I think this was a great
Please book
session.
in time for the part 2.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Let's get this man to commit, on video, recorded.
Yeah.
If it was not documented, it was not done. And our people back home, they say, if you no get evidence, you go explain tire. You know what that means?
Yeah.
Okay, can you translate the pidgin English? It's broken English. If you no get evidence, you go explain tire.
Yeah. You're done without it. You have to have
Yeah,
that.
if you don't have evidence, you're going to keep explaining and explaining and explaining,
Yeah.
and you get tired.
Yeah.
So
So
today we have documentary evidence that you have promised to come share your wealth, of wisdom with us again. And from me to you once again, I can't say thank you enough. I wish there was another way to say thank you. Maybe I'll tell you thank you in a Nigerian language, which is Eshegon.
thank you.
And to the audience, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your time. And from me, the only thing I need from you guys is that support, like, subscribe, share with people in your network, ensure that this, product, the labor of love, meets the people that need it. It's one thing to produce great content. It's another thing for that great content to or actually meet the people that need it. So please don't be selfish. Let's share the love and ensure that we are able to optimize the impact. And from me to you guys, it's love and respect till I get to be in your faces again. Do look after yourselves. Goodbye.